Bilderberg. Shh. It's meant to be a secret. When you hear the name Bilderberg, visions of blacked out limos with nebulous silhouettes of luminaries like David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Hillary Clinton might come to mind. But despite the ultra-high profile of the guests, 95% of the global major media outlets have never ever mentioned its name. Tonight, we're going to find out how and why, and who are the major players in this shadowy cabal as we go on the edge. Bilderberg, who are they? What are they? And how have they become able to rule the global social political scene without any public scrutiny, totally under the radar for so long? And what have they got planned for us serfs and vassals in 2012? To help us navigate these questions and to get some answers, we're joined by a very special guest this evening. Among other things, he's on the writing team of Channel 4's 10 O'Clock Live and 8 out of 10 Cats, but he's also a journalist. He's one of the only journalists who has covered the Bilderberg meeting for The Guardian over the last 3 years. Let's welcome Charlie Skelton. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Patrick. Hello.
So, let's get right down to it.
Yeah.
Bilderberg, what is it? And who are its members? What's the history of it?
Well, that's a very big question. Fortunately, we've got a bit of time. It's an enormous thing that doesn't get written about. That's one thing. It's a huge security operation that occurs once a year. But in practical terms, it's a group of people, a small group of people, called the Bilderberg Steering Committee, that enlarges once a year to incorporate maybe 130, 140 people. And they go and sit in an exclusive, heavily guarded hotel somewhere in the world, behind a big police cordon with helicopters flying over, and they spend 3 days having a conference, and it's a proper conference. You know, they have their lanyards, they have their table outside where they pick them up, and they have
delegate badges.
Their delegate badges, and it's you know, they've got a schedule and they keep to it. You can see them coming out for a cigarette every so often, if you've got a long lens, and so it's often written off as a talking shop by some people that would like to diminish its importance, but its actual importance can simply be divined from the list of people that attend, and there are now they admit attend, and it's an extraordinary who's who of the power players in international finance, industry, in intelligence, and media ownership, and with a little sprinkling of European royalty, for good measure.
This isn't just any ordinary summit, and also that's one I want you to explain to our viewers. This isn't any ordinary meeting. You know, like the G8 or the G20, you have the heads of state there, and you have the public faces of public policy. This is something very different, just by the nature of the attendees and the way who's on this list. This isn't just people from one industry. Yeah. These are the major media moguls. These are the political movers and shakers, the future presidents of America, or vice presidential candidates, key people in key positions.
Yeah. There's a little habit they have of managing to invite people to Bilderberg the year before they take high office. You know, for example, David Cameron.
Yep. Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. You know,
and I heard a story that you know, they always invite the prospective U.S. president to Bilderberg the year or the 2 years before he might be running for his party's nomination. And basically, when Bill Clinton was there in 1991 or 1990, they make them open doors and you know, bring the water to the table, almost like you know, these are your new bosses, and this is Mr. Clinton or Mr. Obama.
There's a really interesting quote actually from Clinton, which you can look up, which is he's talking about the fact his campaign manager, and I just can't remember the name. There's too many names.
James Carville?
Possibly invited him, sort of took him along to Bilderberg and said, you know, here's the new guy, you know, kind of thing. And Clinton says it was at that point he kind of realised he'd gone up a level, and he was suddenly, you know, the kind of hand of the lottery had come down and gone, it could be you. And so yes, so
Tony Blair was at Bilderberg?
Yeah, and he's lied. He's lied to Parliament about going, which is quite serious.
When was he there?
I can't remember.
But
there's too many facts.
Before he was PM?
I think it's the year before.
So before he became PM. Okay.
Yeah.
Because in America, the Logan Act forbids public servants from, you know, non-state meetings with foreign entities. Elected officials they're forbidden by U.S. law.
Your James Steinberg, Deputy Secretary of State, was there last year. He's on the list, and he was meeting in private with the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, who was there. Contrary to what they say, they Bilderberg, in whatever small amount of literature they have, their website, Bilderberg Meetings, they always stress, you know, that people are here in their private capacity. They're here as private individuals. It's very much sort of Chatham House rules. We're just having a little chit-chat. However, I last year rang the Treasury whilst I was there in St. Moritz and said, can you, because we had a photo, someone managed to get a photo of George Osborne coming through in his limo, and I said, can you confirm whether George Osborne, the Chancellor, is here, and if so, in what capacity is he attending this summit? And I spent a whole day practically on the phone to the Treasury, eventually being bumped around, and they came back with a response, which was, yes, he's here in an official capacity, which is an extraordinary thing.
George Osborne was in St. Moritz last year.
In his official capacity as Chancellor of the Exchequer for 3 days, one of his biggest, you know, you look at the Chancellor of the Exchequer's diary.
A totally secret meeting.
That's a big chunk.
Totally private meeting.
Yeah.
Secret with the heads of captains of industry, the heads of state, or former heads of state. George Osborne's there.
Yeah. And when people
talking about what?
Well, you know, not making policy, as they insist upon, not making any decisions, etc., etc. But when people say, you know, why are you at all bothered by this event? You know, why can't they just go and have a private chat? Well, precisely because my elected Chancellor of the Exchequer is there with a Treasury official for 3 days as Chancellor of the Exchequer, with the head of Deutsche Bank, the head of Barclays, the head of HSBC, the head of Airbus, the head of Daimler, you know, etc., 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 the head of the NSA, and reporting back not a single sentence about what he did there. Nothing. So that's just deeply inappropriate. And what I have found in my small number of years of going along and just sort of turning up and seeing what's going on is it's a constant mind problem. I was going to say a rude word then. But you get there and I don't know if you know the phrase cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
And you're going, hang on, I've just seen, there's helicopters above me, there's armed police, there's more limousines than I've ever seen in my life. There's a, you know, depending where you are, there's a, you know, a Navy boat off the shore. And you turn around and there's no, you look around and you think, where's the press?
Yeah.
And you go, well, I don't understand. And I actually took 2 colleagues of mine who work on dispatches, Channel 4 dispatches, and they're proper journalists, not unlike me. I'm just a hobbyist, but they're proper journalists, and they work in current affairs, and that was their response. They were sort of going, this is a bit odd. Well, I don't understand where the press are.
Look at Image 106. If we get that on screen, you know, the mainstream media before 2010. I saw a few mentions of it in the Washington Post. They blurbed it in the New York Times last year. Yeah. But before 2010, 0. So explain about that image. Reuters, or you did a search for Bilderberg?
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole Reuters news service and all its archives, how many results did we get?
Yeah, 0.
0.
So at the end, that's another part of that. You're there, you think, well, presumably there's some kind of, this is scratched its way into the kind of mainstream news consciousness somehow. But, you know, AP and Reuters, that people think of as this kind of crystal clear, you know, outpouring of pure news, don't mention it. And you sort of go, well, that's a bit weird. I don't really understand that. And
my mother's 70, right?
Yeah.
And she didn't know about Bilderberg until 2 weeks ago when I mentioned it to her. And she was active politically her whole life.
Yeah.
At some time in Washington as well, when we were very young. I said she was just flabbergasted.
Yeah.
She's like, what? Who?
Yeah.
Bilderberg? Who are they? She heard Alex Jones talking about it on the radio, and she's like, what is this Bilderberg? And, you know, she's been alive since 1942.
Okay, well, I spoke to someone, I mean, over and over again this happens. I spoke to the head of a reasonably big TV production company in the UK, he will remain nameless. I was explaining to him that I was off to the Bilderberg conference. We had this chat, and he couldn't really understand what I was talking about because he thought it was the Bilderberg conference, and it was some conference about the toy Bilderbears. And he'd never heard of Bilderberg. And, you know, I spoke to someone, I rang up the ITV forward planning of their news, and I said, are you interested in covering the Bilderberg conference? And they went, you know, the Bilderberg conference, that rings a bell. And it's when you hear things like that, you go, it's not, as much as there's a conspiracy to keep a lid on this story, the lid's been kept on so well, there's now a kind of conspiracy of ignorance, where people just don't know. They just don't know about this thing. And I mean, I was talking to you before the show about, I work on the show 8 out of 10 Cats, and the host of it, Jimmy Carr, the comedian, he said, last year it was on when I was there in St. Moritz, and he said, well, look, this big conference is on. Why don't we do a joke about it? Let's do a joke about it on the show. And I went, it's just great, let's do that. Sat down to write a joke about it, and I suddenly realized in order to write a joke about it, you had to explain that it would have had the biggest setup in joke history in order to explain to people what the punchline meant. So, you know, that you can't even write a joke about it because it's not one of those things that you go, all right, it's that. Although, hopefully that's changing.
So you got an interesting story. Just tell us your background. I think you've been in comedy, and you've been a writer. Yeah. And how did you get involved in Bilderberg? Tell us the story from the beginning, because it's a very interesting story. You're going into virgin territory as far as the media is concerned.
Well, I suppose I have two people to blame. My wife, for slightly nudging me in the direction of more interesting and perhaps sceptical news analysis, and also President Obama. And I remember it was the night of the election, of his inaugural, what would you call it? Not the inaugural, when he'd won the election and he gave his address to the, you know, where everyone's crying with joy at this guy. And I was with him at that point. I was full on Obama, thank God, Obama, thank God, Obama.
A lot of people were.
Yeah, I was there, and I lost it on that night. And he gave a speech that was so hollow that he managed to destroy my faith in politics, in mainstream politics, right there with his speech, with his acceptance speech, and it was so bad and so empty and so not like a normal human being talking.
Michelle and I are going to change the country, and we're going to fix all that.
Yeah. So I just went, oh God, what have I just been? I was sending emails to David Axelrod, the head of his campaign, going, look, I don't know if you need any jokes.
He's Obama's brain, by the way.
Yeah, right.
David Axelrod, that's Obama's official brain.
So anyway, I fell out of love with that. A few months later, I just was, you know, I'd come across the Bilderberg conference a little bit, and I just thought to myself, it's odd that the mainstream news don't cover it. And then I thought, hang on. I remember walking along the road and going, why don't I just do it? Why don't I just see whether I could manage to do it? And I just contacted someone I know at The Guardian and said, look, I don't know if you want this thing. I'll go and do a silly thing. I'll just turn up at this place, see what happens. You know,
where was it?
That was in just outside Athens.
In Greece, okay.
Yeah. And they said, yeah, it might be funny. Yeah, what's this thing? This builder what? So, yeah, okay, let's do that. And I went off, and I was...
The greatest minds at The Guardian had no idea.
Well, I had no idea. No, exactly. And this was from fairly high... No one really...
Jonathan Steele had no idea.
Yeah, but no one had... But
Freeland had no idea.
But in the defence, there wasn't really any reference to where it was. And I remember finding a little reference in a kind of internet forum going, we think it's in Vouliagmeni outside Athens. And I sort of went, OK, well, this is worth a punt. Took myself off to Athens and... thinking, oh, this will be funny, see what happens. And then I entered a dystopian nightmare that practically gave me a nervous breakdown.
Let's show some images from your first trip to Bilderberg. 111. Let's cue up image 111. And I think, tell us what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, that image is exactly where my life changed in terms of Bilderberg, in terms of my relationship to
what's going on there?
Authority. That's outside the hotel. That's some Greek police. And I stupidly took a photo of them. And from that point, I was just arrested, re-arrested, arrested, followed, harassed.
They threw you in jail? Or
endlessly.
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 They just threw you in and you got out? And
just turned down to the police station. It became, at one point, I took a photograph of a limousine's wheels as it went past, literally like this, with a little tiny digital camera, like that. Next thing you know, like Starsky and Hutch, they come up. You know, cars, motorbikes, I'm off down the police station again.
Let's look at 112. Tell us a little bit about this guy. And we'll look at that after the break. But, yeah, we're going to go into some of the veteran alternative media that's covered Bilderberg and talk a bit more about your first experiences in Greece after the break.
Will do.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine. On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm here with my guest, Charlie Skelton, and we are talking about Bilderberg. And Charlie, I got a few texts from our viewers out there, and one of them asks, are there any other foreign journalists that you've run into at the Bilderberg meetings? And one person who I know comes to mind is Mr. Jim Tucker. So you cue 112, and there's a good photo of Jim. Tell us a little bit about Jim, how you met him.
Yeah, well, that's just after I met him. I took that photo myself, and I just turned up here in this little seaside town outside Athens in 2009, and I wasn't sure whether, I genuinely had no idea whether I was in the right place or whether there was any kind of a conference was going on. And then this figure just walked down the road wearing this big hat, and I thought, hang on, I think I've seen this guy before.
With a cigarette.
Yeah, I think I might be in the right place.
Yeah.
And that was Jim Tucker, who's been kind of Bilderbothering for decades now.
30, 40 years?
Goodness knows, yeah.
So he's got a source inside Bilderberg. And of course, a lot of people are familiar with Alex Jones has covered Bilderberg judiciously for the last 4 or 5 years. And so Alex works off of Jim Tucker's source.
Yeah.
And so Jim leaks to Alex what the agendas are going to be and so forth. I think that's pretty extraordinary that Jim Tucker's managed to preserve a source inside Bilderberg for 30 years.
Yeah, remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean,
think it's incredible.
Then again, you know, I might start saying I've got a source in Bilderberg and just start going, yeah, I think here's her agenda. Yeah. Because who's going to say no? No, it isn't. But anyway, no, but I'm sure he does. And yeah, he's an indomitable fellow. And there's some other people that have been kind of covering it for a few years and for longer than a few years. And there's a Swiss guy, Manfred, from he's got a website which it's called All Smoke and Mirrors in German, Alles Schall und Rauch, or whatever you say, and I can't speak German, so I apologise to the German language, what I just said. Daniel
Estelin.
Daniel Estelin, yeah.
Did you meet Daniel?
Kind of, yeah.
He wrote the book, Bilderberg, and that was kind of most people's first segue.
Yes, and you know, it's a pretty good, I would recommend the book. I'd have a little pinch of salt around some of the things that he says about himself. Yeah, yeah. But he's the information, the photographs, it's all good. Yeah. And the documents he's got, it's all good, and so if you were going to start somewhere,
we're not plugging him.
Well, I'll plug it. You know what? Do you know what? I would plug it.
But as a reference.
But he, I met him last year. Well, I say I met him. No, it was in Citrus in 2010, where he decided to out me as an MI6 agent.
Well, you know,
in front of my wife.
It happens to the best of us, Charlie.
My wife took him to task.
I've been outed as a I've been accused of being MI6, MI5, CIA, and I get these emails from people, and I email them back and say, I really wish I had the second paycheck. To be quite honest, I could afford to buy a nice car or something. But
unless they've done such a good mind control job of me that I just don't even know.
Yeah, you're a sleeper.
Yeah, the phone rings and I just. Yeah.
So I got another text from one of our viewers. Edge text is saying, Ed Miliband is likely to be the next British Prime Minister. And have you seen him or known of his attendance at any Bilderberg meetings?
I'm going to betray my ignorance and pass on this one. I can't remember. Goodness. I mean, well, perhaps some of our viewers could Google that.
I believe David has attended. David,
right, yeah.
David Miliband, but
yeah.
not to Ed, not to my knowledge.
Right.
And this is another text that came in from one of our viewers. It's really a good question. This is getting back, bringing things down to real humanity a little bit. The security services and the police, like the ones that roughed you up in Greece, do they really know who they're guarding, or are they completely oblivious to what's going on in the conference?
Really interesting was in Spain what happened with the police, because a few days before they had to stand in a long line around, a kilometre cordon away from this luxury hotel. They were out on the streets marching about their pay.
Okay.
So
the police were.
Yeah, and
right.
so the Spanish activists were very good at talking to them about, this is a bit weird. These are the guys that are screwing you, and you're here, and we're kind of we're sort of on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
And there was actually and I think this was a sort of myth, a legend that sprung from this kind of exchange of views with the police, was that one of the police took his hat off and turned and joined the throng of protesters. And I'm not sure that happened, but it's symbolic of what did happen, which was a lot of sympathy was expressed by the Spanish police. And for example, there was a couple of guys that got caught in the woods, with a heat seeker helicopter over, and and the police motorbikes and stuff. They got them, took them off to the head of the local police, who sat them down and said, "I'm totally sympathetic towards what you're doing. Off you go." And they went, "Oh, okay, wow, that was a bit." So yes, they're absolutely human beings. I don't know whether you will get quite that level of sort of sympathy in Chantilly, Virginia, 15 minutes up the road from the CIA.
I noticed that yesterday the British police were marching on Westminster, and all the police had their caps pulled down. Was that to avoid the CCTV cameras, or I thought it was
That's
bizarre.
a mess.
It was bizarre. Everyone had a baseball cap on, but I didn't see any I didn't see any kettling of the police.
They didn't kettle themselves.
No. So we're gonna do a little look through your Bilderberg family album here.
Okay.
Let's go to image 110. And Charlie, you just walk us through these images as we cue them up. What's going on here?
Okay. Well, that's a nice. This is taken by a guy who he just decided to come along. He's a British guy. Came along and thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do some journalism, because the mainstream news aren't doing their job.
Who's in this picture?
This was at the front. We've got Józef Ackermann, who's the head of Deutsche Bank.
Okay.
So the guy on the front right, and he is. If you want to start anywhere in Bilderberg, I would highly recommend you just Google Józef Ackermann. Dr. Józef Ackermann. He's the head of Deutsche Bank. He's a non-executive director of Shell, and in fact, Shell is very, very heavily represented in Bilderberg. It's probably the largest corporate presence is Shell. You've got,
as is the Dutch elite.
Yeah, well, you've got the Queen Beatrix is
Prince
there,
Bernhard.
Royal Dutch Shell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Prince Bernhard, God rest his little SS soul.
She's the bicycle queen.
Okay, right.
Beatrice, that's what they call her.
But have a look at the list of people in terms of Shell, and you can pick out the chairman, Jorma Ollila. You've got the deputy chairman, Lord Kerr, K-E-R-R. He's very interesting, Sir John Kerr. So you've got a lot of Shell people. And so Ackermann, he kind of sits across lots of different things. He's on the steering committee, so he's in the kind of inner sanctum of Bilderberg. And he also, to show you the kind of people they are, in terms of their international roles that they play, he's head of the Institute of International Finance, which is the group that was representing the private investors in Greek debt, and they were renegotiating their haircut, kind of the Greek debt. Ackermann is in charge of that negotiation.
He's steering the Greek haircut.
Yeah, he couldn't have any more fingers and any more pies if he tried. Okay. So he's a good person to have a look at, and you sort of look at his CV and you go, okay, and I'm starting to get a sense of the kind of people that are that are here and the level that they're operating at, and it's an extremely high level. And you said earlier, what is Bilderberg? And you know, one of the other things I think it is it's kind of where real power just creeps down enough so you can see it, because it's in contact with the rest of the world. You sort of have that. You kind of got the middle managers, the politicians, and they're kind of invited in, and there's and you sort of get just at that moment you sort of see the. I was going to say the tip of the iceberg, but it's kind of upside down. You know,
because they get together. They only get together once a year.
Yeah.
So then you have. Is Bill Gates? Has he been to any Bilderbergs to your knowledge?
I don't know, but he's got.
I know
You've got Craig Mundy from who's the chief. What is he? He's one of the chief finance officer. No, chief research officer or something of Microsoft. So he's a big Microsoft guy, Craig Mundy, and
pharmaceutical heads. Will they be there?
Oh God, it's 20 questions.
Yeah.
Head of Nestle, he's there. I love him. We've got a lovely photo of him. Unfortunately, I haven't given to you. But
Procter & Gamble.
We've got him there with his going off to his helicopter with his shirt open.
Let's look at 103. Cue up 103, and this is from your little snapshot collection.
Yeah, I mean that was in Greece again, and that was when I think this was just as I was about to be arrested. Again, for the sort of 13th time. And,
did you see who was inside this particular limo?
No, we didn't, but you know, you take enough shots of enough limos and occasionally you get lucky.
Yeah.
And you see, so what's interesting about the shots of people in limos is quite often they're kind of cowering down. We've got a wonderful shot of a guy with a copy of the Financial Times, and he's sort of like this.
Yeah,
right?
I remember David Rockefeller at Chantilly,
like
down here, like this.
And I wrote about this actually in The Guardian. The feeling I get when I see someone, you know, doing this as the car goes past is real, genuine embarrassment on their behalf. I just think, what are you doing, you child?
Yeah.
That is not how an adult enters a building.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
at least, you know, there's
it's like a vampire at sunrise. It's just like...
it's just more like a teenager, a stroppy teenager, like, you know, don't look at me.
Yeah.
And at least there was a weird thing that happened in Sam Ritz, where they all went on a sort of country walk. Not all of them, like a group of them, including like Eric Schmidt from Google and Lord Mandelson. And anyway, they go down the hill, but at least Thomas Enders, the head of Airbus, has a kind of conversation with some of the activists there.
Let's look at 102. You know, cue up 102. Who tell us about this chap?
Now that's Vossa. He's from... I just like this shot because it's slightly embarrassing for him, because he's quietly adjusting himself in the hotel lobby. And I just like publishing that image wherever I can. It's just, you know, it's amusing.
I get a moment of vulnerability for the global elite there.
So yeah, I think he's Shell again.
And 101, cue up 101. What's going on here?
Who's that? Oh yeah, in the middle now. This is Henri de Castries in the middle. He is the new boss of Bilderberg. They've had a kind of it's been a real shake-up for them in the last year. Just after the last conference, Kissinger resigned as kind of the
Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, Henry Kissinger, who managed to go to Spain and be wanted as a war criminal in Spain at the same time, but without being arrested. So, you know, slippery fish.
Pinochet managed the same feat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's kind of stepped down from Bilderberg, and this guy's stepped up, Henri de Castries. And he's an interesting fellow. He is head of AXA Insurance, which is, and I'm going to get this wrong, I apologise, it's something like the 8th biggest company in the world, or something like that. So when people go, are they really big players? And you go, yeah, the head of it is, you know, head of one of the biggest companies in the world. And he's the guy now, the new blood. And there's a lot of new blood. There's like the sort of Facebook crowd.
Yeah, we're going to on the next segment. We're going to go into the social network.
Okay, yeah, because they're all
the young Turks of Bilderberg.
The young Turks are definitely they're in, but
so the Council on Foreign Relations, and the equivalent of that in the UK is Chatham House.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now these are globalist think tanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do they sit under the Bilderberg Group? Is the Bilderberg kind of like Bilderberg Holding Company (PLC), and its subsidiaries are the Council on Foreign Relations to govern U.S. foreign policy, Chatham House, the British foreign policy, and then you have the RAND Corporation and some of these big think tanks in Washington. How can you abstract? How can you describe the Bilderberg Group? Like, What is it in comparison to maybe the business world or the entertainment world? How would you sum it up?
The analogy, which, because you have to deal in analogies really to give it some kind of a shape, because it's a big and complicated and not very visible thing. You know, it's a bit like touch of the blind men touching the elephant kind of thing. I think it's got a trunk, it's got a, you know. Anyway, the best analogy I've got is that it's the cabinet. It's the cabinet of the world government. So if you think of the British cabinet government.
When you say world government, and some people out there are going to be like, what's he talking about? There is no world government. Just
well, the way it functions. Okay, the way when I say world government, I would probably have to then say, sorry, I don't really mean world government. I mean kind of the Anglo-Dutch American empire.
The governing
of the broadly of the West.
The unofficial governing empire.
Yeah.
Not in name but in form.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, with its history of banking interests and its military industrial. You know, you know, let's call it what Eisenhower, the military industrial complex. Mm-hmm. You know, or the prison industrial complex. Some people call it. You know, it's. I like Anglo-Dutch American Empire because I think that gives it a bit of.
That's
I think it's reasonable to give it a bit of history because
it
is empire, and you can, you know, when you're wondering. The news today is, you know, these days you turn on the news and it's empire in action. You know, you're getting to watch an empire. What some would say dying, others would say flexing its muscles.
An old correspondent from the Times Tribune told me once, long before I got into this journalistic game I'm in now, he said, Patrick, he's all, don't be fooled. He said, Britain is the brains and America is the muscle. So he said, the agenda comes out of Britain and the Americans provide the muscle. They provide the military muscle to execute the plan.
Right.
But how it's portrayed in the media is like, oh, you know, London and Washington are at odds about this particular trade agreement or so and so. But really, essentially, that's not the case.
Yeah, and if we look at the history of Bilderberg, it's got its roots in the intelligence community. Talking of intelligence, and it's kind of intelligence meets finance meets military, and all of those things. And if you go back enough and into documents, you can see how it, which I'd happily talk to you a little bit about because it's something I've been looking at the documents and reading. You know, it's like Alex Jones always says, go back, read the documents, and you can read the documents, and it's all there, and you can see how it was formed, and through its birth, you can kind of get a sense of what it really is and how it operates.
Well, in the next break, we're going to get into Bilderberg technology, who are the technology players there, and especially social media. We're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Twitter, we're going to talk about the Arab Spring and how this fits into the Bilderberg world.